Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, H.J.R. 8 is a joint resolution which sets forth Iowa's application to the United States Congress to call for a convention of states for the purpose of proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States for submission to the states for ratification to impose fiscal restraints on the federal government and to limit the federal government's power and jurisdiction. Many of us spend a lot of time talking to voters during campaigns, and I think it's one of the most, if not the most critical parts of what we do here is talking to the people that we represent. We do a lot of it here in this building and out in our communities, and it's on the doorstep. And I have had the opportunity to talk to tens of thousands of people on their front doorstep, and everybody's got their issue they talk about, but if there's one consistent theme that has come up time and again, it would be folks of any political persuasion that would say, do whatever you can to help stop the federal government. And Iowans, and I think Americans instinctively know that our federal government, particularly with the size of the federal debt, has grown too large and too out of control. And they're frustrated by a federal government that seems far too insulated from the things that impact their daily lives. And it was not meant to be this way. In a representative democracy, we should have access to all of our elected officials, and they should be responsive to our needs and what's going on. And that is the system that the Founding Fathers set up, and that they wanted each individual to have that authority and for the states to have that authority. And so here we have today trying to avail of ourselves of a mechanism that the Founding Fathers gave to us in Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution, is that two-thirds of the states should call for an application. We will call a convention of states, and then they can propose amendments back to the states for ratification, and then would be subject to the 3/4 ratification that we use under the mechanism that has always been done to amend the United States Constitution in the past. We are on an unsustainable path with the federal debt in this country. This is not a partisan issue, and I desperately do not want our discussion of this and where we're going with this to be that at all. This is not about one particular amendment. It is about us as state legislators representing our people to try and do what we can to put the future of this country and this state back on track. You see in public opinion polls that Iowans are satisfied with the direction of things in the state of Iowa. They're satisfied with the job that their elected officials are doing. But conversely, they are very frustrated with what's going on in Washington, D.C., and a federal government that either lacks the political will to act or does not want to act. People are frustrated that their interests are not our interests. Again, I've heard that from Democrats, Republicans, and independents. And we might all come at that from a slightly different direction and particular policies, but I think we share a common concern that this is happening. Right now, the U.S. national debt stands at over $18 trillion. I'd read it for you, but I can't even keep track of the last few digits on that number. It's growing substantially as a share of our gross national product. And at some point, the commitments that we have made to the American people are simply not going to be possible. And so it's time to act. And that's what we have before us today. This is not a constitutional convention. For anyone that's talking about this with people, or writing an article about it, this is a convention of states as specifically set forth in the United States Constitution. I just want to make sure that the words we're using are correct. And there is plenty of control over the process. As we talked about here in debate, the control that we exert as state legislatures, there's going to be the control that the American people and the people of Iowa will exert over this. Playing forward how this would play out if this convention of states were held, there would be a tremendous amount of attention paid on it, a tremendous amount of public interest, media interest, and that pressure. You think about how difficult it is sometimes to move a piece of legislation even in this in this chamber, imagine the pressure that would be on that convention of states and how much more difficult that would be if they strayed out of bounds. So that's the second check on that. And the third and most important check on what would happen at the convention of states is that still has to come back to the states for ratification. And 3/4 of the states would have to ratify. That is an incredibly difficult hurdle to clear. And it was the wisdom of our founding fathers to make it that way. They were wise enough to give us the mechanism to do this and not transferring all of the power to the federal government, but they knew that the states needed to have this mechanism, this right to avail themselves of when we got to this situation. But they also kept that, made it very difficult to go through the process. We are on an unsustainable path in this country, and I think we all instinctively sense that. But not only on a fiscally unsustainable path and talking about numbers, this is immoral in my mind. How much are we saddling the next generation and the generation after that of Americans with to pay for our spending today? These issues, these things that we see the federal government doing so often are noble endeavors. They are to meet a need that I think many or all of us see as worthwhile, but they're not fiscally responsible or sustainable. And we need to make sure that we get that back inside the box. So my question is, what are we handing over to the next generation of Americans? Is it going to be the same great nation that we were privileged to grow up in, to have the opportunities for prosperity and freedom? Or will we hand over to them something else? And as I say goodbye to my children every morning on my way up here, it's one of the things that motivates me to come back up here, is that I can say that I did my part to be a steward of the blessings that were given to me by those before us.
Sign the petition at cosaction.com and get as many of your friends and family to do the same. With your full address, your state legislators will know that you really are their constituents in their district. Our success depends on you, so we're inviting you to be part of history. Let's invoke the constitutional solution that's as big as the problem.